welcome to the School of Speech podcast, presented by SpeechTherapyPD.com. School of Speech is designed specifically for the school-based SLP to come together to discuss current topics, tackle difficult situations, and share our insights. Our goal is to bolster confidence, celebrate our triumphs, and foster a community dedicated to the excellence in the school setting. Hello, welcome everybody. I am Carolyn Dolby, and I am your SpeechTherapyPD.com podcast host for School of Speech. And School of Speech is designed for all of us school-based SLPs to come together. We're going to explore current trends, share our insights, and really champion our expertise. Our goal is to bolster confidence, celebrate our triumphs, and foster a community dedicated to the excellence in the school setting. Today's episode, Curricular Integration, a time-saving strategy for school-based SLPs. And we have Dr. Christina Bradburn here with us today. She is going to be discussing how we can incorporate curricular materials into our therapy, its benefit for enhancing student progress. She'll be giving us the when, where, and how to effectively integrate these free resources and ultimately streamline our practices while boosting student outcomes. Now, before we get started, I do have a little bit of housekeeping. Each of our episodes are 60 minutes long and will be offered for 0.1 ASHA CEUs. Okay, Christina receives a salary from Shelbyville Central Schools as the Assistant Special Education Director. She is also a consultant for the Bureau of Education and Research and is receiving an honorarium for today's presentation. And for non-financial, Christina currently serves as the coordinator for the ASHA SIG-16 School-Based Issues Coordinating Committee. For me, I receive a salary as the district level specialized support clinician for Cy-Fair Independent School District. I'm compensated for my graduate courses that I teach for the University of Houston, and I'm a consultant for school districts across the nation supporting their program development and staff training. And I also receive compensation for non-financial. I'm a member of the Texas Speech and Hearing Feeding and Swallowing Task Force. I volunteer for Feeding Matters, and I'm also a member of ASHA's special interest groups. I'm 13, Swallowing and Swallowing Disorders, 14, Cultural and Linguistic Diversity, and 16 with you, Christina, School-Based Issues. But I want you guys to get to know Dr. Bradburn a little bit more before we get started. So currently, I think I said she's working as the Assistant Director of Special Education in Indiana. But from 2001 to 2022, she was a school-based in the trenches SLP working with preschool through the 5th grade population. She's a national seminar leader for the Bureau of Education and Research, and she speaks on the topic of integrating speech and language interventions into classrooms and curriculum using a workload approach. She earned her doctoral degree in special education from Texas Women's University. That's where I got my master's. Whoop, whoop. She's received her BS and MS in communication disorders from Indiana State University. And her research interests include school-based interventions, classroom teacher contributions to treatment effectiveness, and the impact of integrated distributed practice techniques on speech and language progress. If that's not enough, Christina also seeks to improve the experiences of SLPs in the school setting, and that is really evidenced by her recent appointment as the coordinator of ASHA SIG-16 Coordinating Committee, as well as her past service as the chair of ASHA's School Issue Advisory Board, and her participation in ASHA's Leadership Development Program, Schools Cohort, and as a mentor with ASHA's Leadership Mentoring Program. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Thank you.
Wow, we are so lucky to have you. You are just so exciting to have you here. But I'm so interested. I want to know your journey. What really led you? I think your research interest is so wonderful and just really, it's my cup of tea. I want to know what led you to your school-based interventions and its impact on school language progress.
And I think I'll start with the short answer, and it's high caseloads. I had very high caseloads. And so I was always looking for something that, would help me service all of my kids in a way that I thought would help make them make progress efficiently, and then be able to move them along the continuum of services, right? They start, maybe I see them intensely, and then they on consult, and then I can say, you have everything you need to access your education, speech and language wise. But then after I started looking for those time-saving strategies, what I was seeing is that not only were they saving me time, but they were impacting their progress, not only in the classroom, or in speech, but in the classroom as well. And so we started monitoring progress for our kindergartners in their phonemic awareness if they're in speech versus if they're not. So that's the short answer. I think most of my early career, I was started as a preschool SLP that was integrated 99% of the time. I never really left the preschool rooms because I had 4 different rooms I went to. And so then I left, did private practice for a little bit, and then came back to a public school where pullout was the model. And after having been integrated for so long, and then being integrated into homes as a early intervention provider, and then going back into a school that had a caseload of 109, and every kid was pulled out in groups of 6 for 20 minutes twice a week. And I saw progress, my idea of progress, it kind of just stalled. And I also felt like I was like hung a shingle outside my door, and I was just a clinician working in a school versus, what my actual charge was. So I started looking there for ways to integrate. And then the research, what led me to my research interest is because I was already doing it. So my research interest is using curriculum materials. Not does it have an impact on speech and language development. So here's the kicker. No matter what we use, the students will make progress. I can do therapy out of my purse, but because of my skill set, my students will make progress. What I was looking for was the positive educational impact of my services. So I wanted their grades to go up along with their speech services. I wanted their educational access. I wanted their, socialization on the playground to improve. I wanted their participation in specials to improve. I wanted their school life to improve because they received speech services. So the curriculum materials research came because I started only using curriculum materials. I stopped buying things and making, printing, laminating, spending hours and hours making things that would either flop or work, but I could never use them again. So, I was able to pre-teach and reteach and do all of these things with all of these different materials that were provided to me for free. The research interest came from, I wanted to see if what I was seeing was actually true. Was it, was using curriculum materials not only time-saving and cheaper and made me feel more part of the school, but it actually improved educational access for the students. And so that's where a very long answer to your question is that's where it kind of started.
That's beautiful. I love it. I'm looking at our listeners. We've got a lot of direct pullout, which I think we kind of expected. We do have some teletherapists here, so welcome. And we do have some both pullout and some push in too. But I think a lot of us are still kind of doing the direct because a lot of times that's kind of what we feel like is expected, which kind of makes me want to talk a bit about, because like parents that go to a clinic is different than expected in the schools, right? Do you want to talk a little bit about, because we were sort of started to talk about that before we started. I want to get your take on that.
Absolutely. So I don't know about you guys, but in graduate school, I didn't learn how to be I learned how to be an SLP, but not an SLP in a school. All of the pieces about making a schedule, I learned about how to write an IEP or what should be included in an IEP, but not how to write one, which I think is a big difference. And so we also don't know that difference between the charge of a school-based SLP and a clinic-based SLP. A clinic-based SLP can focus solely on enhancing and improving and perfecting speech and language skills. But in a school, that not only can't be my only focus, it really shouldn't be a focus, because my sole reason for being an SLP in a school is to ensure that whatever speech and language disorder or delay that the students are presenting with, I either need to eliminate or minimize the educational impact of that speech and language disorder. I don't necessarily need to always enhance or improve. It typically comes along with it, the speech and language development, but my initial charge is to ensure however I can to eliminate that educational impact. And I want to point out that I'm saying educational impact and not academic impact. A lot of times administrators will push back and say, well, their grades are all A's. Why do they need to be in speech? If you're saying there needs to be a negative educational impact, and I say because education is way more than grades. It's, going to specials, it's asking someone to prom, it's being comfortable trying out for a sport. It's, all of that pragmatic language that's necessary to be a successful human is also necessary in a school. So I'm really the research also kind of helps me talk about my passion of we're not in a school, we're bleeding hearts, I think. And so we want to help everybody and we want everybody's speech to be perfect. And again, I'm from Indiana. It's the highest caseloads in the nation on average. And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't think about, okay, does there continue to be a negative educational impact? There may have been when we first enrolled, but their speech doesn't necessarily have to be perfect in order not to be eligible for school-based services anymore. And I know from experience, it's very hard to communicate to parents and communicate to administrators. And I have some tips, making sure you talk about it at the initial eligibility meeting. The 3 things that make a student eligible for school-based speech services: they have to demonstrate that delay or disorder, they have to show the negative educational impact of that disorder, and then they have to show the need for specially designed instruction, which would be us. We are the specially designed instruction piece. So I just talk about that from the very beginning.
Like you brought up those prongs. I think sometimes as you're straight up right on saying about speech pathologists, we want to come in and fix it and we don't want to let go. And sometimes, yes, there could be a disorder or a delay. There might be an impact, but it's only the supports from specially designed instruction from a speech path needed.
And I'd say that's not our fault because no one told me how to answer those questions. No one said, I know exactly how to say there's a delay or disorder. I can check that box of the 3 prongs. But even the second one, I didn't know how to demonstrate it, how to professionally communicate with a parent as a new SLP, what a negative educational impact of a speech and language disorder could be. Mm-hmm. And then also what a specially designed instruction is and what it could be from someone else, not an SLP. I wasn't confident in my skills. So my caseloads were much higher as a younger SLP because I wasn't confident to be able to communicate that. Using curriculum materials, though, helped me be able to communicate both of those much easier because that second and third prong, it's much easier for me to demonstrate a negative educational impact because if I take all of their curricular materials and I can't show anything that they can't do on any of the work that I use because of their speech and language delay, I can't demonstrate that negative. Mm-hmm. Or if they're, playing on the playground and if they're ordering their lunch and if they're participating in specials, if I can't do that, then I can't check that box. And then the SDI part, if I'm watching a teacher do exactly what I'm doing and doing it well, then they don't need me. And I can document that because we're using the same things. We're using the same material. So it's continuous. The continuity between that allows that to happen. So
I love it. And, we use so many different terms and acronyms. We were talking about that earlier. So just so we're all on the same page and with terminology, I'm thinking maybe defining for us what you mean by curricular materials.
Absolutely. And I'll give you a list of some I just talked to an SLP here in our district today about. So one of them was the script from the play that the 4th graders are doing for the fall play. The script from that the 4th graders are performing for parents is a curricular material, along with the novel that they're reading in 3rd grade, Charlotte's Web. That's a curricular material. Also the math worksheet that has the multiplication 4s for our student that's working on an R. That's a great curriculum material. Spelling lists are great. That's what I actually use in my intervention research. I use spelling lists, but it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's going to get a grade. So I never really used grades for my students to demonstrate the negative educational impact. It could be their inability to find someone to play with on the playground. To me, that's a curricular skill to work on because it's all part of school. It's educational access. So that's the thing I talk about. I'm not looking at making their grades better. I'm making sure that they can access their education, which includes recess, specials, lunch, the play, track, cross country, all of those type of things. So.
Wow. Yeah. And I think just getting our minds around that basically is answering those 3 prongs.
For real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of my write-up of my research. Yeah, is that it was a pleasant surprise after my research and I was writing up the dissertation, like, oh, I didn't even think that it answers all 3 prongs with the curricular materials. It makes it easier on a school-based SLP to communicate it with parents. So it's more easy. It's easier to implement research-based interventions when the research is actually done in a school and has school SLPs in mind. So
absolutely. That's like a double whammy. Hey, you're talking about, are you talking about grade specific materials? I guess maybe, I know you're talking about that, but maybe talk to me about adapting the materials for for our use.
Sure. Well, I can, in our research, we actually use spelling lists. So what we wanted to do is to see every 2 weeks, the SLP would use 2 weeks worth of, digital flashcards from a company that, produces speech-based flashcards. And she would use those for 2 weeks in articulation drill, and then she would do 2 weeks with the spelling lists. And we alternated back and forth. And what we monitored were the students' spelling grades throughout. And so what we actually showed is their spelling grades improved on the weeks that she used the spelling lists in therapy. She didn't do spelling rules. She didn't work on spelling. She just used the actual spelling list in therapy. So to adapt a spelling list for a kiddo with an articulate, you just look for their sound in there, right? But if they don't have their sound, or for instance, sometimes people will say, oh, how do you get enough words? And to me, that's still a very clinic minded. Do we have to drill 100 separate words, or do we have to drill one word 100 times, as long as that one word that they're drilling is going to be used all week in class? To me, it's much more important to find a word that will be used over and over in class that week on their spelling list or the vocabulary list. And so say it's a word that has OR in it, and I only have one on their spelling list. And okay, then I drill that word 100 times versus finding 100 OR words. Mm-hmm. So that's one way I would adapt. In my mind, my mindset had to shift that if I get 4 good productions of this word that he's going to say all week versus 4 good productions of a word that he will never say again after he leaves my presence, that's what I was always, pep talking myself. It's okay that there's only 2 words on the spelling list, or it's okay the vocab list only has one thing that I can drill. He'll get that one thing, and maybe he'll be successful in class when we leave, and he'll generalize the one thing we did, because we know generalization is the hardest part. The one thing we did will mean more to him than the game we play that incorporates the language skill that he's having difficulty with.
Now I'm just kind of being cheeky, but I thought, yeah, like first graders probably not going to use the word door, but we'll be using the word, I was just saying door as I was joking about in my head, thinking like how important it is to using the spelling word and words that they're actually going to be using.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I actually have an example. So one of the flashcard sets I used to have was iron ore, O-R-E. Was one of the drill sets. Oh. But then I thought, how silly. How many times a day do they say OR, the word or? And so making sure, I know it's the same motor plan, but just making sure that they know they're drilling that word, because we use that word 50 times a day, 50,000 times a day, versus this one they'll never ever say again if they're not, and don't even know what it is. So
that was exactly what was popping in my head is why be using words, how much more impactful or meaningful for the child if it's actually words that they are utilizing right there.
And a little bonus is if you use curricular materials, even if you do pull out. So I know there's a lot of, and like I said, no matter who's doing the services or where they're doing them, if it's a skilled intervention, they're going to make progress. So I just talk about time saving and making life easier for SLPs. I'm not against one or the other, but if you do pull out services, a lot of times you might get a lot of pushback on when you can pull a student. So don't pull during language arts, don't pull during math. But if you're pulling the math materials that are in front of the student and you're going to enhance their ability to access those materials through your skill set, I actually never had any pushback after I was there for a few years and once they realized I was taking the materials with me and they weren't going to miss content when they were with me, I didn't have any restrictions on when I could pull students. I pulled during language arts, reading block, math block, as long as I didn't pull during the Friday testing day. Friday morning spelling tests and vocab tests, then they were pretty okay with anything. So that was just a little side bonus of using the materials, is they're realizing that it's a team effort and you're not pulling away from their content to teach something separate and then send them back that they have to catch them up. You can read the same story. You can just target the skills that you need to target while they're out there. So
perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Just a little added bonus, which kind of, if one of the things we were talking about earlier, well, you and I were about common challenges. I think that might lead into, you're saying a benefit, but what are some challenges in SLP? They're like, you know what, I want to start using curricular based materials, but what are some challenges do you think that they might come up against, and maybe give us some, how can we overcome them?
I think the very first one I always get asked about is it fun? Like, do the kids have fun? Are they still engaged? And I will tell you, from moving away from any game-based or any of the things I used to use that were very colorful and very what I thought were engaging, I actually had increased engagement. So the nerd that I am, I went out and I tried to find some research that would help me figure that out. And there is something called the theory of competing resources. So many of our kids don't know how to play games, which is something we can teach them. But if we're working on subject-verb agreement, or we're working on S-blends or something, and we pull out a game to play that, the theory of competing resources said, don't try to teach two new things or two hard things at the same time, or they won't learn either of them. So a lot of times I was pulling a kid out to play bingo or inferencing bingo. That's a big one. As a kiddo on the spectrum, we were playing inferencing bingo. However, he didn't know how to play bingo. He hated to lose. He didn't know how to take turns. What I was really focusing on was teaching him how to play bingo, and I never actually got to the inferencing, my goal for working with that student. So if you pull a class novel that has full of inferencing, that he's already read the chapter, and you reread the chapter, then you don't have to teach something new. You're not teaching new content, which is instruction, and we're interventionists, so you don't want to ever teach anything new. And it's not hard for him because he's already heard it. But if he's never played bingo, a student on the spectrum that I worked with hated to lose. He didn't like to take turns. He couldn't manipulate the markers. So I was teaching him to do 4 or 5 hard things along with the actual really hard thing, which was inferencing. So I think moving away from teaching new games and having to teach that, you can focus way more on your goal, and then you can move them across the continuum of services even faster because you're focusing on the one thing you need to versus 10 or 15, and it's cheaper. So
love this.
It can be fun. I can be fun with a spelling list. I mean, they seem to like me. So
absolutely. And I think it's true. We don't have to have a game to be fun. We are fun. But okay, so I do just feeding, swallowing. And what you made me think is what I tell my staff about: if a child is not in a proper seating, they're spending on that little round little seat.
That's the theory of competing resources. Yep.
I'm stealing it, using it for myself. I love it because they're spending their whole time trying to keep themselves upright, that they don't have time to be really focused on the feeding task. So that was a huge aha for me. And I'm sure those listening are going to be like, OMG, me too, right. Because I didn't even think about that.
Or even groups. In groups, the theory of competing resources applies to behavior modification. So most of my services were individual, not because they can learn from groups, and I did groups when it was necessary, but a lot of times for me, I was trying to do 2 hard things, which was behavior modification with a group of 5 boys and teach all of these skills to them. So I just, kind of tried to break up as many groups as I could into individualized services. I can send you that citation later. It was kind of changed my whole SLP life, honestly, when I read the theory of competing resources. So, because my whole life was that.
Yeah, I need that. I want to, that has been, that's one of my big takeaways just from right now. I love that. So sorry, I think I got us derailed us for a hot second. Sorry.
We already talked about the other challenges, not finding enough words or enough, we've already talked about that one and how to overcome that one. So
yeah, I liked what you said, that it's more important, even if it's just the one word on their spelling, and do that 100 times, because boy, they'll get that right in spelling, even though our intention is actually the verbal. But why not? I mean, who doesn't want a double whammy benefit?
Well, that's why we're here. It's not even a double. It's why we're there to, eliminate that negative educational impact. So if they drill that word 100 times, just because they may still say it wrong, hopefully it'll improve. If they hear auditory bombardment of it correctly, it'll improve their ability to spell it. So we're eliminating the negative educational impact of their speech and language disorder, even if they can't say it perfectly after just one session. So
okay, I'm going to make sure the SLPs in the back just heard that, because you're mind blowing me right now. Our job, and correct me if I got this wrong, our job is to eliminate the negative educational impact. So if you're using their spelling words and you're using that for their artic, and although they might not say it actually, precisely perfected, but they're spelling it, it now is not negatively impacting their educational.
Which is why we're there. Yeah. Isn't that, it's nuts. Or minimize. I eliminate or minimize, because there are times where they'll have to learn to compensate for word finding. Word finding will always be there. So one of my favorite stories is I was teaching a little girl who I knew word finding would always be difficult, but it impacted her behavior and her willingness to focus or to participate in class, because she just had trouble finding the right word when she wanted it, or just never had it. Like, her vocabulary was also very low. And so I was trying to teach her what we do as adults. We'll say, oh, it's that thing with the thing that we talked about last week at dinner, or, we just make something up until somebody nice fills in the word. We don't actually know the word, but we're hoping somebody around us will fill it in. So that's one of the skills I teach kids with word finding. I don't teach them all the vocabulary in the world because it's very difficult for them. Their brain doesn't work that way. But I will teach them to say things like, it's on the tip of my tongue. I might need your help. It's that thing that has the thing, but talk around it, because everybody is so nice. People, when I present and I pretend to do that, they will fill the word in from the audience. And it's a human nature kind of thing. So students will do that for our students with word finding problems if you teach them that compensatory strategy. One of my favorite stories is, though, I tried to teach the little girl to say it's on the tip of my tongue, but she kept saying it's on the tip of my teeth. And she really couldn't get it right. So it's just one of my favorite stories, is because she's trying to compensate for her word finding difficulties. They still kind of sneak in there. So,
and your point being that giving her that strategy, because no, we can't give her every single vocabulary word she'll ever need.
Right.
But you just minimized the negative impact by the fact that she is giving the strategy to the listener to help her out.
To fake it till you make it. I mean, that's what I call it for the kids. Fake it, because I know you don't know it, but they don't have to know you don't know it. That's my job to a point. If I know they can learn vocab, I do categories, I do all the different things. But once we may have IQ and we may have some other testing that shows this is going to be a difficult lifelong skill, I have to change what skill I'm teaching so that it minimizes the negative educational impact for them, because she would get so embarrassed, she would act out so that she didn't look,
Sure.
not smart. So
absolutely. I mean, right, behavior is a form of communication, and she was communicating.
Yep.
Well, the thing I'm thinking about is, okay, I mean, it sounds great. I mean, it really does. It sounds amazing, but my thought is, how do we collaborate with teachers? That seems to me like is it big? Because to me, that's big.
I used to think it was.
Okay.
I just came to the conclusion, and I learned that I am not going to be able to physically face-to-face collaborate with teachers as often as I would like to. So I tried to figure out some compensatory strategies, right? So one of the things that I would highly suggest, if you want to use curriculum materials in your services, that you get your own access to them. My teachers would try really hard to remember to give me a copy of the reading for the week or the lesson plans. And really what it usually is a Google Drive. It's like every grade level in my district has a Google Drive that has the entire curriculum loaded on it. And it has all the sub-plans, and I have what they're doing from day one of school to the last day of school, including recess duties. And so you get your own access. All I had to say is, can you guys share your drive with me? And so now I can click and I can tell the SLP working down the street, the second grade is reading this story next week. It'd be great for this student. So, but it's all click, click, click. So that collaborative piece isn't necessarily necessary. Then when you start using the same materials, you develop that collaborative vocabulary. So I can talk about how hard that story is, or how author's purpose was repeated 100 different times in this book, this week or whatever, or the kids my students really didn't get that. How did you work on that in class? So they'll much more willing to talk about and let you into their classroom if they know that you're going to enhance their teaching. But if they think that you're just going to do speech therapy and take 30 minutes of their instruction away, when you say you want to integrate, that's a whole different story. And so if you know like I said, it doesn't matter what you use. You can do therapy out of your purse, because it's the who, not the what. It's the who's doing the service, or else we would have subs, right? SLPs could have subs if I could take a bunch of materials, hand them to a person and say, go through these worksheets with this student. But that's not allowed, because the skill set that we have is unique and it's specialized. So it really doesn't, my research was setting out to show it doesn't matter what we use. So why don't we just use the curricular materials to enhance their education? Because it really doesn't matter. So once they see that you're using what they're using, they're much more willing to ask you questions, tell you when the students do great things, like, oh, when he was reading out loud today from his reader, he used the best K. I mean, I got all kinds of things like that. But they're not as willing to correct students in the classroom if they don't know that they've already seen that material with you. So when they knew I was drilling the spelling list on Friday, the teachers were much more willing to correct students who were saying the words wrong in class, because they knew exactly which words I had drilled. So that collaborative piece was natural, and it wasn't necessary to find time to do it. They would help me correct in class because they were confident that I had worked on that sound, and it shouldn't have a negative impact mentally or, socially on the student because they've already worked on it with me.
And do you find what service delivery do you find that this works best with?
Because I was about a 90 to 95% integrated therapist where I did most of my services in an educational setting outside of a speech room. And that doesn't necessarily mean in the classroom, but in the library, on recess, in the hallway, that's where I spent most of my time. I would think people would expect me to say integrated. But really, when I did have to pull out services, it was just as beneficial because it was pre-made. I just had them bring out whatever was in front of them. And it was kind of cool to actually use my skill set to look at this piece of paper and say, oh, I can pull their goal right out of that. Let's do this one sentence in this whole big, sheet, circle it. And it felt really good to use that skill set that I had developed to adapt those materials kind of on, and I don't want to say on the fly like it wasn't planned. I knew the topic because I would read through and I knew what they were working on, but once it's right in front of me, it was really kind of fun to say, okay, it's like a detective work. What are we going to find in here? And I'll be honest, like sometimes it just didn't work. Sometimes it just didn't work. And so I always had carrier phrases like this. None of your spelling lists this week have a single word with your sound on it. So we're either going to make nonsense words. We're going to delete syllables, which is a phonemic awareness skill. We're going to delete this syllable and add this one in to make one of your words. Or we're going to use this carrier phrase that has one of your sounds in it or one of your language goals and then plug the word in at the end. So it's not perfect, but neither are the materials I spent lots of money on. Right. I mean, I always had to adapt those as well because they're not individualized for my students' goals. They are general deficits, right? They work on grammar, they work on whatever the general deficit is, that book that I purchased. And it was great because I had some starters, right? I was so excited to have some ideas from these. And I'm not knocking therapy materials because they work. Again, it's not the what, it's the who. And they're great. Some of them are really good. Again, not knocking the traditional commercial therapy materials. What I'm saying is if we're there for the positive educational impact of our services, that's where the curriculum materials are superior, not because they help their speech and language skills, one or the other.
Yeah.
I will say, a surprise of my research though, when she used the spelling list in therapy during the alternating treatment design, their speech sound production, their percentage of speech sounds correct also went up during the spelling list week. And yeah, it was better during the spelling list week. And we kind of, you have to write it all up. And when we wrote it up, we talked about it was because the teachers were more willing to correct them those weeks. So yeah.
Oh wow. So you got, I'm trying to think of what I would call that. It's on the tip of my tooth.
There you go. It's on the tip. Yeah, and it actually went against my hypothesis. So it kind of, messed up my research, but because I said their spelling grades would go up when we use spelling lists, but their speech sound production would be similar on both weeks, on both sets, because it's not the what, it's the who. However, I forgot about the collaborative efforts and the generalization piece of using the spelling list. So yeah, kind of messed it up.
But hey, but I'm sorry, but it was still positive outcome, so that's a win.
Sure. Yeah.
Win. I'm thinking about goals. Can we kind of maybe talk about, I know you can't just give us a bank of goals. That wouldn't be individualized, but do you want to give us how do we write those measurable and authentic goals that are going to be targeting, but using it through the lens of the curriculum?
Right. And I think that's a great way to put it. So if they're eligible for speech and language services in a school, we're saying there is a negative educational impact somewhere. So the first thing I would do is I would set aside the standardized speech and language assessment that I had done. I'd set it aside because I used to pick my goals from the deficits there. So I would, if the CASEL showed me that they had deficits in this, and this, I would pick from that idea of deficit. But actually, I completely set those aside. And when I'm writing goals, I go and I talk to the teacher about their initial reason for their referral. Is typically the goal that the initial reason, like they don't participate in class or they, she just won't talk in class. And it's because she's, her standard score on the Goldman Fristo was a 45, or something like that. So of course she doesn't feel comfortable, or she won't answer questions from the paraprofessional during testing. A lot of times, so it may go against some of the developmental norms, but sometimes, for instance, a goal for a kindergartner who has a severe speech disorder, who can't make any sounds, would work on isolation and on all of these different sounds. One of their goals would be to say all the letters and sounds of the alphabet clearly enough so that when they are assessed, they are not docked because they don't know the letters. They know the letters, but because they say A, B, E, 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 F, D, their negative educational impact is right there. So I will work on them recognizing that they don't say C, and just work on making it as close and approximate as we can until they can say their ABCs clearly enough to pass the screeners. That because we don't want them to go into title or to tier 1, tier 2 academic interventions if it's just because their speech isn't clear enough for someone to understand. Yeah, so the goals are really focused on that negative educational impact. So also, if they can't say the sounds correctly, isolated, that'll be their first goal. I don't try to put an F in initial position of words for a first grader. I make sure they can say every sound of the alphabet clearly enough so that someone that's assessing them will know what they're saying, so they don't dock them and mark it wrong, so they don't get moved into academic interventions that they don't need. That's the negative educational impact of their articulation delay, right? Is that no one understands them, so they can't show what they know. Mm-hmm. So the goals are very focused on where they're struggling in school. And it's also, so you can write a measurable goal. They will name all 26 letters of the alphabet with approximated enough so that they can get 26 out of 26 correct on their, that's something like that. But also making sure that we're saying that what we're using. So using the classroom reader, I want them to talk about subject verb agreement or use correct subject verb agreement when they are retelling a story from their class reader, from the class story of that week. Because that, first of all, will give me the material I'll use for my progress check, the material I'll use for my intervention, and it's the same material the teacher's using for the progress check and the intervention. So the kid can see the why behind why he's with me. Because not only do they see improvement with their goal, but they also see improvement on the assessment that the teacher's giving them later.
And maybe the answer of, what do you do in speech? Play games.
Absolutely. And we play Uno. What's your goal? Because my principal would walk around. One of our evaluations was based on the fact if our students state their goals when asked by our evaluator, our administrator. Like if an administrator asked the student, not me, what they were working on, if they could tell them, then that was part of the eval, which I thought was cool.
That is cool.
When they would say, what have you been doing in speech? And they would say, playing games, or, that was one of the reasons I started moving into the curriculum, to show the students the why they're with me.
Right. And it's just as important for the student to know why.
Mm-hmm.
As
Absolutely.
It is for the teacher to know why, the parent to know why, but but for a child to know why, other than it's just fun to go down there. I'm getting out of class.
Well, we are fun too. I mean, we are a great reinforcer, but we can be that same reinforcer in the classroom. We can be that same positive, impact, mental health impact. We can just be that same positive impact on them, no matter where we work with them. It doesn't necessarily have to be when they come down to it. So
I would love to talk about, because we've kind of been talking about like direct taking them out. Can we move it now into more of like, paint me a picture, paint me a word picture, if you will, of what that would look like pushing in.
Oh yeah. So I think my favorite example to use, most of you on here probably know what barrier games are as an SLP, where you put a barrier up between you and the student and you draw a picture and then you tell them what to draw and see if they can use their receptive language skills to follow along. And then you move the barrier and they're like, oh, it doesn't look anything like you just said. Or you tell them to tell you what to draw and they've drawn a dog and you end up with a box. So, that's where the barrier for me was manila folders, in therapy. So I would do one-on-one or small groups and we would put these barriers up and I'm like, okay, we're going to play a barrier game. Use your good skills, use your full sentences, make sure you use descriptors and prepositions to tell me where to draw the different things. So when I talk about integrated services, I don't do anything different. I still play barrier games. It's just, I do it on a bigger scale. So, and I use whatever topic they're talking about. So for instance, I would go into a first grade classroom and they're talking about body parts and the 5 senses, and so I have drawn a body, a big giant one, and all of the kids turn around away from me, making the barrier. Someone holds up the picture and every kid in the classroom tells me what to draw. And so I draw it on the whiteboard behind, all the kids turn around. It's terrible. There's no head, there's no neck, there's no nose. And first of all, I can see, am I holding my speech and language students to a higher standard just because the castle says they should be able to do this, but no first grader can do this? So that's one of the benefits of being in the classroom, is that nobody could do what I was asking them to do, to tell me where to draw things. And so I'm holding them to a higher standard educationally than what the castle says at this point they should be doing. So again, those standardized tests sometimes don't tell us a lot. Then the best part about it, though, is since I know what I'm going to be doing in there, I can pull some of my my more difficult kids that have the more, the difficulty with lots of different things, and I can pull them out and pre-teach. And I'll just say, hey, Peyton, when you hear me say the word face, you say the word nose, and you're going to be right. And we're going to practice that over and over. And you're going to get to show off some skills in class that your teacher will not have any idea. And I'm practicing with them one-on-one, so pre-teach. And then the actual teaching happens in the classroom. And then later, if some of my students really don't do very well, I know what to reteach later. So a 45-minute integrated lesson could be 15 minutes of 3 5-minute individual drills with specific kids, a 20-minute in-class lesson, and then whatever time is left, 10 minutes, 2 5-minute individual sessions with kids that really bombed the in-class lesson. So it doesn't have to be in the room the whole time. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're still teaching what the teacher had planned on teaching during that time, right? The 5 senses, it's mm-hmm. writing time, it's language arts or whatever. And as long as you're still keeping that in the back of your head, it's just your therapy that you would do in your speech room, but on a bigger scale. And you have 25 other kids, but you typically ignore all but the 5 that are yours. They don't know that. They don't realize you're not calling on them. They don't realize that you're not coaching them, but they're still getting the benefit of a skilled, highly skilled interventionist who knows how to break things down for everybody in a different way. They're getting the benefit of that as well. So.
And I know when I've talked with other clinicians that are really gung-ho on the integrated service model, is the benefit of the teacher then seeing how they can better teach their content.
Well, I call it the yellow ball story. So I always carry a yellow tennis ball anywhere I go when I'm co-teaching or integrated, because I always hold it over the kid that's talking or hold it over my head when I'm talking to get the eye gaze that I need. And so there's teachers that carry them in their pocket and hold it over their head now and hold it over the student's head that's talking to get the visual attention. But I never coached a teacher to do that. But they saw it work and they're like, I want to do that. And it's I love stealing things from other people that I see work. I'm making mine. I might give you credit. I might not, because it's fantastic. But nothing's new. So I'm sure we've seen somebody do it.
Right. Things that you have said that have made an impact on me is that really that our role, I'm just saying that our role is to minimize, maybe eliminate, but minimize the negative effect. I love that we've talked about that. And then I want to talk a little bit more about goals, because you said something and I want to make sure I heard it right, because I think this might be a wow for more than just me, is when you said, I'm not pointing my finger, but what I think I heard was that, you don't have to take your goals just from those deficits from that standardized assessment. Well, here's where we need maybe a little bit of guidance because when we are taking the data of our assessment, when we're taking the results of our assessment and we are writing up that present level, that it's going to go into we call it their IEP, and we say that something is a deficit, at least where I'm from, we have to then have a goal to address that deficit. Right. So help me understand how that we might broaden that.
Absolutely. So yes, I think we're talking about 2 different things: determining eligibility and writing goals. So I do use the standardized assessments and everything I'm supposed to, right, to determine eligibility for services. Once I get that and I've written the report and I say, based on, their age and their, whatever, they should be doing this, but they have these deficits that, along with the negative educational impact, I've talked about that, and their need for SDI, they are eligible for services. Okay. But then when I write the deficits and the present levels of the IEP, so those are separate for us, right? So the evaluation report is over here, and then the present levels, I don't talk about those deficits from the castle. I talk about the deficits in the classroom so that I can write goals, because I don't care, honestly, I don't care if they don't have subject, I just keep saying that, if they can't use irregular plurals, right? I don't care necessarily about that unless I can show a reason in the classroom that they need to work on that. And 9 times out of 10, I can't find a reason to work on that necessarily in the classroom. But if they can't, use more than 2 words at a time, and that doesn't really measure it in our test, right? But if they can't use more than 2 words at a time, their sentence length when they write is low. They can't use adjectives. They don't use subject verb agreement because they say she run instead of she is running, all of that kind of thing. So I'll talk about when they're writing, their inability to use more than 2 words at a time verbally is impacting their ability to write detailed descriptions of pictures as they need to be doing by the 3rd grade. So I always connect it. We have to in Indiana, I'm sure you guys do, have to connect any of our goals to state standards for education. And I used to struggle with that because I'm like, I don't know what to connect this goal to. I don't know how to connect this goal that I have picked from the standardized assessment to the standards from 3rd grade language arts. And when I kind of shifted my mindset over to, well, how is this deficit in this impacting them in the classroom? Because a lot of times I threw 50% of them out because it really isn't. I mean, it really isn't having that impact on them. The teacher would not even have pulled that out. I always go back to the initial referral from the teacher as to why they're referring the student in the first place. And a lot of times it's sentence length. They only use 2 words at a time. They can't follow multi-step directions. The standardized assessment tells us why they're not doing that, right? That they don't have this, and this, but you can still write the goal from that initial teacher classroom referral of can't follow 2-step directions. And then work on all of those things as their short-term objectives or just your strategies, right? But the goal has to be whatever is impacting them in the classroom. So that's how I separate kind of, I think, what you were asking.
No, that's exactly
deficit areas. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I wanted some clarification on is that, yes, we are using those standard assessments in our informal. We're doing to establish eligibility.
Right.
And we're not just taking what the deficit was from that test. Yes, they're eligible. So
I
now
used to.
I know,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I do. So yeah, I'm changing.
Right.
I'm growing, I'm learning, I'm doing. When you know better, you do better.
Do better.
And so I'm thinking how, rather than being like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have 15 goals because
and you could have 50 if you use the cast, right.
I think we get bogged down. Oh my gosh, they're never going to get out of speech because we have so many things to work on. But I think what I'm hearing, and I'm hoping everybody's getting this, that really, yes, they're eligible, but let's look where the actual impact is. And that's what we are to be working on.
And typically that pares it down to about 1, 2, or 3 goals. I mean, I rarely had more than 2 goals for a student when I really looked at what do we need to focus on this year to improve their ability to access 3rd grade in general, 3rd grade, 2nd grade, 5th grade. I mean, really, if you really come at it at that mindset and you don't I used to get so overwhelmed. They would be like a 50 standard score, 50, 50, 50, right? And I'm like, well, what do you work on? Well, you work on from the initial referral, whatever the teacher said that they couldn't do, and you work on it, but you can use those deficit skills and you can target them. But really what you're focused on is how can I get them to not do that anymore in class? What do I need to teach them so that they do this better? And it's a lot easier to write goals that way and not cry. I used to cry writing a goal.
There's no crying in speech.
Right.
Sorry, I just made myself crack up. Sorry about that. Excuse me. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I think if anything, we're walking away with, let's make sure our goals are directly the impact. And then I like the idea that, all that other stuff we will be working on, but we don't need to be taking data on every little thing. We really need to see the big picture of impact. And that's where that's where our lens needs to be really.
I mean, not to open up a whole new can of worms with like 8 minutes left, but the data part used to drive me crazy too. The plus minus for this and the plus minus for this. How do you judge? So I completely, when I was integrated, I was able to change the way I looked at data collection. And, every 3 weeks I would pull away all supports and I would do plus minus, what's this, describe this picture, plus minus, did they get it? And every 3 weeks is the only time I kept plus minus data. I could still bill Medicaid because the other times, what I was keeping track of is how much scaffolding support they needed, what supports, what interventions they needed in order to be about 90 to 95% accurate. So how much did I have to do? How much did I have to give them? Did I have to touch their throat? Did I have to touch my throat? Did I have to show them Legos for the 3 words that I wanted them? What did I have to do to get 90% accuracy toward their goal? Because I was trying to avoid all of that negative practice of what's this? Oh, no, it's not that. It's this. I don't let them say it unless I feel like they're a little. So being integrated allowed me to see that teachers don't do that. They don't give them a plus minus in the grade book every time they spell a word wrong. The only time they give them a grade is after they test them specifically on Fridays for spelling. So SLPs, if we're going to work in schools, we can look at our services that way. Teachers teach and then they test. And what we're doing all the time, plus minusing them to death, is we're testing all day long and we're running ourselves into the ground. And so if we're going to be in a school setting, we can allow ourselves some room to teach and keep data, because you have to bill Medicaid. I understand that. Keep data on their performance, but you can keep data on what you did to get that performance and have that data. And then every 3 weeks, test them to see. And I say 3 weeks because we do 9 weeks report cards a year. So it's just much easier. Teachers do it every week, but we run ourselves into the ground trying to test our kids every time they sit with us. But because I'm integrated, that was impossible to do. Because there's 5 kids and I'm teaching them in a group setting. I even tried to put Avery labels on my legs for each kid and plus minus as I was walking around the room. Yeah, we've all done weird stuff. Yeah. But now it's a whole different ballgame. So.
And I want to, before we started, we were talking, and you said that you had a caseload of 109. And I'm pretty sure that some of those listeners out there are like, I have that. What can I do? What did you do?
Well, and that story. So when I took over the caseload in this elementary school, it was pre-K through 5. It had a self-contained classroom and 1 preschool, and it was 109 on the caseload. And I think there was just some, they had not necessarily moved across the continuum of services because perfect speech was the goal, right? And so the educational impact wasn't the focus. So when I left that school about 10 years later, the caseload for the next school year was starting at 45. So it took several years to get it down, but that was a combination of integrated services, going in and seeing where the deficit areas were and working with the teachers, being very upfront with parents at the very beginning. Once they get here, we will have to dismiss because they're no longer eligible for school-based services. Once we can no longer show a negative educational impact, once we can no longer show the need for me, we will start talking about dismissal. Make sure they understand that, they sign the IEP. So I was really talking that up way ahead of time. But I honestly think the biggest change, and I know opening a whole other can of worms, was using a 3-to-1 model, like a flexible service delivery model, so that 3 weeks of direct services with students and then that 1 week of indirect, a lot of that time was spent observing in the classroom and not working directly with the kids and writing really good reports and doing really good testing so that I had what I needed to be able to dismiss when needed. When I could observe a student and say, you know what, I watched them in 5 minutes of every class period today, or, because I had some flexibility on that 1 week, 3-to-1, the 1 week. And they never did anything that they used to do. Everything, they could access all of their education. They participated. The teachers didn't correct anything they said. They weren't perfect on their arm, but I think they're ready to be done with school-based services. I had that data. So, and that ability to move them across the continuum of services from initial eligibility to consult to, all the way through to dismissal was easier once I started using some flexible service delivery and some integrated approaches to services, because I got to see them in their natural habitat.
Yeah, right.
I got to see them in the wild. I got to see them in the wild, which was their classroom, versus with me, because they were always so much better with me.
That's across the board. They're doing it in the speech room, but they're not doing it in the classroom. And so then we have them forever.
We do, and that's why the caseload had expanded to 109. Right, and even them seeing me in the classroom made them do it better in the classroom because they didn't want to mess up in front of me. Oh, that's the lady that makes me say it this way. I better say it this way. Okay, I was okay with that, and then the generalization happened, and then the caseload was cut more than half. After a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. I want to make sure everybody writes that down. It takes a while, but it did get better. So.
No, but I think that we do need to hear that because our caseloads are just ridiculous.
They are.
Because I think we really do need to hone in more of school-based therapy
And the way you're saying that is that when you said they no longer need school-based therapy, like that's a fair statement. We need to be saying it like that. And I know those listening, they're probably like, yes, I do that, but I'm thinking for myself, I need to do better at just certain things that I think would make it easier when getting towards dismissal.
And the parent pushback is a thing. And I know everybody's thinking it is a thing, but if you start it from the beginning, it's that pre-education of what those 3 prongs are. It's listed in every single one of my IEPs in the notes section, and it actually has check marks by it. And every year I go physically through the IEP and I put a physical check mark. And I'll say, once we can't check all 3, just, giving you a heads up, once we can't check all 3 of those, we've talked about this, they are no longer, and they really don't, I mean, I don't want to say they can't argue, but they really have been informed all the way through. It's not a surprise, right, when they come to their 6th grade meeting that they're not eligible anymore. I don't want to surprise them. I want to educate them all the way through.
Right. And also, this is also another, I think, a little value added of this episode. Thank you so much, Christina, is when you gave us a really good explanation and supporting evidence of why a 3-1 or a flexible model really is where we need to be, is when you said that if we're doing the 3-3-1, 3, we're teaching, reteaching, we're doing the skill, it's the direct or the push in, whatever.
Whichever, yeah.
But then that 1 week, we can really prove that our assessments are more robust. Our data collection is really authentic because we're seeing them, as you said, in the wild. I love that.
Right.
I love that.
Right.
And again, data. And when we can show, how else are we going to see that generalization? Because if we just ask the teacher, oh, are they doing it? They're going to be like,
no.
Oh, wait. If I say yes, they're going to say, no, they're not. Right?
Always I got no. Yeah.
Always. And a quick no,
yep.
And so we're not it's giving us the time to really see it and bringing it to the teacher's attention, because nothing is worse also is when when we are presenting everything in that meeting and we're prepping the student, the family, everything, that dismissal. And then all of a sudden the teacher says, oh no, I don't agree.
100%. Yeah, that happened to me. And so I also, it's the same reasoning behind the education all the way through about what it means to be the difference between a school-based and a clinically-based SLP. So
yeah, absolutely. Wow. Okay. I just want to make sure that I can't believe it doesn't feel like the time has gone.
I think we hit our learning objectives. I think we ticked those off, but yes, if we need to.
No, I think, we talked about how to adapt the material. I loved all your, how to overcome those challenges. Fantastic. Yeah. I'm wondering if we have, I don't think we have anything. Oh, no, I did take some notes. This isn't a question. We didn't do it, but I want to here's some of my takeaways that I got from you. It's who's doing the service, not what. So it's not what the service is, but who is, that's that prong, is they might still need the what, but it's who needs to be doing it. I think all of us need to keep hearing that. I know some of us are like, I know, but I do think we do need to really look at that. It's more important. It's the who that has to be doing it, because if the parent can be doing it or the teacher, then that's not us.
Like I always say, I didn't go to graduate school to teach a kid to bite their lip and blow. I mean,
yeah,
to make an F. Yeah. Right.
That was my huge takeaway. Another huge takeaway that I'm really bringing back to my district is when we are to really separate the eligibility criteria when you're doing your FIE or your eval versus then when you're doing your present levels.
Absolutely.
That's a huge one for me.
And that's the meat of the difference between a clinic-based SLP and a school-based. I think that's the way you can show it, like with an artifact. Those 2 documents are the difference between us. Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
I mean, mic drop, Christina. And the last one is that theory of competing resources. Yes. All right, people. Theory of competing resources. The reason why maybe not doing that game or that game is impeding progress. That example you gave with a neurodivergent child that is more focused on making sure they get right, that they get the game right or the rules of the game versus really what we're needing to work on. I learned a lot. This has been amazing.
This has been fun. Yeah.
I know it is fun. School of Speech is fun. But I want to say thank you everyone for coming and listening. And Christina, thank you so much. I can't wait to have you back because we've already talked about it. And so you've already said yes. So I'm holding you to it. You've already said
All right.
yes. All right. Thanks everyone. Bye guys.
Thanks for joining us on today's podcast. Remember to go to speechtherapypd.com to learn more about earning ASHA CEUs. We appreciate your positive reviews and support and would love for you to write a quick review and subscribe. If you have indicated that you are part of the ASHA registry and entered both your ASHA number and a complete address in your account profile prior to the course completion, we will submit earned CEUs to ASHA. Please allow 1 to 2 months from the completion date for your CEUs to be reflected on your ASHA transcript. For our School of Speech listeners, we have a special coupon code to receive $20 off any annual subscription to speechtherapypd.com. Head over there to get ASHA CEUs for listening to this podcast and all other episodes. The code is SCHOOL20. That is SCHOOL20. Hope to see you on our next episode. Also, please don't hesitate to tell us which topics you would like us to cover in future episodes. To get in touch, drop us a line in the comment section or send us a message on social media.